We'd like to welcome you all. If you need a chair, we can drag some chairs from downstairs. We have chairs. So, do you need a chair? No?
No one's going to sit here. Someone should get this chair.
Okay, there's a chair up front. You can take and move and sit with your family if you'd like. Here's one. And because I'm a Jewish mother, I have to say, you've got to eat. There's lots of food here. Please eat. We have sodas, sparkling waters, regular waters, and lots of cookies and fruits and lots of yummies. And we don't want to have to take anything back inside because it's too much work. Okay? We are here to remember our amazing friend Lenny, who really was a friend to everybody. And I'm getting emails from around the country, and actually somebody from Mexico who emailed and had read the dispatch obituary. And we get to see how he touched our life. And I'm learning from so many people that he touched our lives in lots of isolated, separate ways that we only know, everybody knows one little slice of him. Somebody emailed me today to tell me a secret stash he had from some of his art collection. So I had no idea he had the secret stash. I knew he had an art collection. So it's really been quite lovely. And I wanted to start out by inviting everybody, after we do this, I'm going to model, then comes Bill, and then we want to hear people's stories. We're recording it for Lenny's sister, Lucille, who is in California, where Lenny was buried. And he had a plot there already. It was all prearranged. So it was uneventful in that respect. So all's good there. But we want to hear your stories because everybody has a different story. And you can see how I'm standing to the microphone. That's what we want you to do. So you can, so that everybody else can hear you. Because if you step away from the microphone, nobody can hear you. And we really want to hear you. One of the stories I have is when our daughter Hannah, raise your hand just because people may not know you, the new neighbors may not know you. Hannah normally lives in Havana, Cuba, and she got stuck here, COVID stuck, a year and a half ago, and we've welcomed her in still. We're still talking. And I know. And when she was born, the day I got home from the hospital, I got a phone call, and it was this creepy voice, and it said, "Can Hannah come out and play?" And of course, I was in a daze. I didn't know who it was, and Bill said, "It's got to be Lenny. It's got to be Lenny." And of course, it was Lenny. And that was 30 plus years ago. So he's been a trickster and a funny guy all along. I have a couple of emails here that I'd like to read from friends of his from Borden who wrote to me. This is from Rick Ellis, and he said, "I've known Lenny since 1978. We worked together for many years. Since about 10 or 15 years ago, we would have lunch a couple times a month. It was our custom to allow each of us to pick the restaurant when it was our turn. Lenny always had some off-the-wall joint we'd go to, and he would try to be funny with the server. Most of the time, it was funny to watch. When it was my turn, we would choose to move to a more civilized establishment, which Lenny thought, why would anyone eat here? The last time we ate lunch with another friend, Jeff Campbell, we went to our favorite eating hole, Windward Passage. I can't help reflect on how much fun we had and how much I will miss him. Lenny always wanted to know if I was in the stock market or out. It was always the first thing out of his mouth when we talked. Lenny, if you can hear me, I'm all in. As always, to a great friend, Lenny, keep smiling. And another one, Barney Mead. Okay, so there are many things I could say about Len, as long as I've been friends with him for 43 years, and I can't believe he's gone. I've already mentioned the many pig roasts we used to have, and Len was in charge of butchering the pig. And boy, was he in charge. That's hard for me to imagine him butchering a pig, a nice Jewish boy butchering a pig. And the street parties Len would have, that even my parents from Florida would attend, and Len would be so nice to them. Does anyone here, have you lived here long enough to have, they were amazing street parties. He'd block off Zeller, and we'd have those. So now, some other fond memories. First, everyone loved Lenny, and he loved everyone. Lenny was what they called nowadays a foodie. Anytime we would go out to eat lunch or dinner, and Rick, who was another friend, Rick Ellis, I just read his thing, and other friends would also be there, we would end up at some out-of-the-way dive so that no one had ever heard of except Lenny. Not only was the food great, every employee, including the owner, knew and loved Lenny and gave us special food and service. The thing I will miss most, and there are very many others, are the monthly phone calls from Len for the last 20 years. We moved to Tennessee 20 years ago. Most of the times he would call and we would be out and he would leave a message on the machine. Lenny here, just checking in. Give me a shout. Okay, I'm done with my stories for now.
Just a brief story. 3 or 4 years ago, Lenny was hawking on me to go to some restaurant, and I said, okay, I'll go with you for lunch, whatever, okay. So we went up at this little Italian joint around 3000 or 2800 North High Street, and we go in there, and we look at the menu. The guy comes over, he's the owner, and what would you like? I said, I'll have the stromboli and a Coke. Okay, so it took me like 28 seconds to order. Then he said, Lenny, what would you like? Well, Lenny says, okay, the pizza here. Now, the mushrooms on the pizza, are they canned or are they fresh? And for the next 15 minutes, he is questioning this guy about every part of the food. How's the spaghetti? Oh, the spaghetti, it's excellent. He says, is it really, or are you just saying that? I mean, oh my God. So as his eating partner, I kind of wanted to dive under the table. But on the other hand, as you step back, Lenny loved to support small business, local business. He loved the out-of-the-way places because they were kind of more authentic in his view. But really, food, I think, was just, and the restaurants that he'd drag you to, was just a way to be with people. He loved people, he loved hearing their stories, and that was so quintessential Lenny. Yeah. So we may have some other story, but let's let somebody else, you don't need to raise your hand or anything, just come up to the mic. Let's hear a couple of other Lenny stories, whoever wants to.
So we already know that Lenny took care of his people.
Who are you?
Oh, Helene Rusi, 104. We live down the street. So so when Hurricane Bob blew through here, 12 or so years ago, and our neighborhood was without power for 8 days. Well, actually, our side of the street was without power for 8 days. The other side was without power for 6 days because we are the poor stepchild of the power company. But in any case, Lenny made sure that we had ice. Every other day he would come by, what's the word? And I always said, yes. And he was like, don't tell anybody where you got this. So it was like a drug deal. So Lenny made sure we had ice. And when a month or so into the coronavirus pandemic, he pulls up and says, I'm going to Costco. Do you need anything? I was like, no, I just went to Kroger's. But you know what I couldn't get? Whole wheat bagels. Who knew there would be a run on whole wheat bagels? He says, well, you know what they call a bagel without a hole? I was like, no. He said, an English muffin. 2 hours later, I get a phone call. Come on out front. He hands me through the window a package of English muffins. So Lenny took care of his people, but two things you might not know about Lenny. One was that he was a kick-ass ping pong player. For about 3 years, we had a ping pong table in the backyard because we didn't have room for one in the house. And I played a little bit in college, so nobody in my family could really play with me, but Lenny was pretty good. Actually, he was a little better than I was. And he was vulnerable to a serve that had a backspin on it at the back corner. So if I could rack up a few points on serves, I was good. But if we got a volley going, I could hang with him for a while. But pretty soon, I would send something back that had a little bit too much air under it, and I could see him winding up. And he had this overhand slam. He would go, ha! So yeah, he ended up beating me. But the one thing that I'm sure almost no one knows about Lenny is the story about the picture of the painting here. There were some folks that lived across the street from us and that's a whole stories for another day. But when they moved out, the house was so trashed that the folks that bought it had to put huge industrial dumpsters in the driveway in order to shovel out. Like, there were mountains of wet laundry, multiple mountains of wet laundry, bigger than me in the basement that had to be shoveled out. So one day I'm looking out the window and I see something leaning up against the dumpster that's huge. And I go out to the curb to look at it, and it is a 6.5 or 7 feet tall, 5 foot wide oil painting, badly done, of a female nude who was clearly the woman who had lived in the house, Denise. And I'm standing on the curb just trying to process what I'm seeing. And Lenny pulls by. What's the word? And I nod towards the house across the street, and I said, take a look at that. And he leans down so he can see out the passenger window. And a few heartbeats later, he rolls down the passenger window so he can get a better view. And he finally turns to me, and with that little nod he had, he said, that's something. He looks back over, and for 2 minutes, neither of us said anything because it was like watching a train wreck. You couldn't pull your eyes away, but you just... So finally, he looks at me and he says, keep smiling, which was his classic send-off, and he runs, drives off down the street. So 2 a.m. the next morning, I go out to the dumpster and I try to haul this painting. And it turns out that I don't know what they used as a canvas, but for the frame, they used 2x4s and plywood, and the thing weighed 60 pounds. Now, I throw around bags of dog food and wood pellets. 50 pounds is no big deal, but this was so big, I couldn't get my arms around it. But I managed to pull this thing off from the dumpster and schlep it all the way down to Lenny's house and leave it on his front porch. So a few days later, Lenny pulls up and he's like, somebody left that picture of Denise on my front porch, and I'm sure it's Bill, but Bill swears it wasn't him. I was like, gee, Lenny, I don't know anything about that. So for 3 weeks, every time he saw me, he brings up some other man's name that he was sure did it. Never occurred to him that, for number one, I was stronger than I looked, or that I had the gonads to pull off this kind of practical joke. But nobody knew this except my wife until about 6 or 7 years ago when I told Randy about it and swore her to secrecy. But then I keep meaning to tell Lenny about it, and I could never find quite the right time. So I never did. So there's 2 things to say about that. One is that if anybody comes across it in his house, come and get me, because I'm responsible for it being there and I will be responsible for its disposal. And number 2,
it's in his garage.
Is it okay? I will take care of it. It'll make a great bonfire. But number 2, if there's something you need to say to somebody, don't pass the opportunity by, because you might not get another chance.
Well, good evening. I'm Jennifer Howenstein. I did live right next door. So my story is also about food. I was out in the garden with Ginny Votes, neighbor across the street, and another neighbor. And Lenny would always drive down the street, and he'd slow down, and you never knew what he'd say, but he'd say, this one time he says to us, "Yo, Jenny, you like mung beans?" Well, yeah, okay. And he says, "Go get me a container." I won't do the whole New York thing through the whole time. But anyway, he says, go get me a container. So, okay.
Do it.
He says, "You like mung beans, Ginny?" Ginny goes, "Yeah, I like sprouts, And so anyway, we go get our containers. We come back out to the car, and he goes, "In the back seat is your mung beans." There is a 5-pound bag of mung beans, dried mung beans. He says, "Take as much as you want." You think it was 10? Okay. So I took the bag, and as I took the bag, he starts darting down the street. And I'm like, what am I going to do with all these mung beans? Anyway, Ginny decided she could make it chicken food, and we could grow the sprouts and let it be chicken food. So I've got my big container of mung beans. Jenny's got hers. Maureen's got some. About 20 minutes later, Lenny comes back up the street. "Yo, Jenny, you got those mung beans?" I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "Have you eaten any of them yet?" "No." He goes, "Go get them." So we go get the mung beans. Everyone goes gets their container. We bring them out. Lenny puts his hand out, takes our mung beans. I'm like, "What's the deal?" He goes, "They're expired." They're expired. So he'd had them in his car for quite some time. I don't know how old mung beans, probably got a 2-year date on them. You still have them. 5 years passing. Anyway, Lenny, what a heart. The man loved everyone. He loved every generation. He cared for the teenagers. He cared for the little kids. He just, everyone knows that about Lenny, but it was super special to have our Lenny be the mayor of Westwood. One of the last things he said to me, in August, we took our dad to Kemper House to spend out the last part of his life. And Lenny said to me, "Jenny, you gotta grab a hold of those good memories, because that's all you got. Don't waste your time being sad about where your dad is now. You hang on to those good memories, because you never know what's going to happen tomorrow." And when I heard that Lenny had fallen and the steps that took place after that, I realized, he's right. And I'm sure he lived each day that way so that he could enjoy life to its fullest. So Lenny, what a special guy. Thanks.
My name is Lee Cohen, and I do not.
Closer to the microphone.
Oh,
There
okay.
you go.
Hi, my name is Lee Cohen, and I do not live on Westwood.
You're missing out.
But I met Lenny through Denise DeShane more than 25 years ago, and we've been friends ever since. A part of him that he covered really well, and it's not a funny story, I'm sorry, but it seems important to share the person underneath all of the humor. When I brought my dad here, he was old and infirm, and Lenny bonded with him just the way he did with everybody else. He spent almost every Jewish holiday with me and with my dad and with my son and daughter, and eventually with our grandchildren. And I was saying that I probably had the only picture of Len Hess with a kippah on, because his spirit was very Jewish. His practice less so. There was one other thing I was going to say. Oh, yes. He called me and we met, he asked me where I lived, where I had grown up. And I said, New York. And he said, where in New York? And I said, Manhattan. Are there any other New Yorkers here? Then he said, where in Manhattan? And I said, Washington Heights. And he said, where in Washington Heights? And I told him the cross street, and he said, over the luncheonette or the grocery store. And when he played Jewish geography with my aunt, who would come here until she was 100 for the holidays, we discovered that we are distantly related. Very distantly related, but we were. And he was an important part of my family for many, many years, and we all miss him. Thanks.
Hello.
Want me to make it a little
That would be lovely. It would be absolutely lovely. Thank you. Hello.
I just step a little closer.
A little closer? How's this?
Yeah.
All right. Hello. Good evening. I'm August, formerly known as Gus, of 104 Westwood, Helene and Denise's daughter. I'm sure I could tell a lot of stories about Lenny. He knew me when I was way too young to know him. I'm pretty sure some of my first words in my seat at the dinner table scared the crap out of him. Little baby talking in her high chair. And Lenny was always family to me. My biological grandparents all passed away before I was born, and my brother and I spent a lot of time with Lenny hitting the town, and he really filled that role for us. But it's funny, Jenny, that you should talk about being handed mung beans out of the blue. Because the story that I actually planned on telling tonight wasn't about the time that he got my brother and I chicken feet from the secret menu at the Chinese restaurant. Ice cold chicken feet. Ice cold. It wasn't about the time that we went somewhere on King Road to a place I've never seen since and got the most delicious naan I've ever had. It wasn't that time. It was the time that I grew up at 104, 3 doors down that way. And some of my dearest friends in middle school were the Polsinellis, a few doors down that way. And there was one day I was walking down the street from 104 to where the Polsinellis, 118 or something like that. And Lenny pulls up in his sedan, as he was wont to do, rolled down the window. What's good? Like, just hanging out, living the dream. He says, you like mushrooms? I'm like, yeah, I like mushrooms. And this man, I don't even know where he reached for, to grab it, but he hands me out the window a whole portobello mushroom. It's unpackaged, it is unmarked, unwashed, it is just a whole portobello mushroom. And he said, keep smiling, and he drove off, and he was gone. And I was left with a mushroom and an enigmatic memory.
Oh, let me do that. Yep.
Miss Nancy, so you have to say,
You're gonna
say your name.
Hi.
Take the mask off her.
Hi, my name is Ruby, and the memory that I have of Lenny is nice. And well, I was at my grandma's house, and then Lenny drove by, and he said, "Hey, Ruby, do you like liverwurst?" And then he somewhere got out of nowhere. He handed me a bag of liverwurst. And then he drove off.
Do you like it?
Did you eat it?
Yes.
And did you like it?
Yes.
All right.
I'm her grandma, and I want to add that this sweet man, we moved here 26 years ago, and my daughter, Emma, was 7. And so the following Halloween, the largest pumpkin I've ever seen appeared on our doorstep. Well, who do you think left that? Lenny. So here he is, 24 or 5 years later, giving this granddaughter, the same treatment, love, and generosity. He was truly a kind man.
Yeah. Yeah, and she still likes liver.
Hi, I'm Stella. I don't have a ton of Lenny stories, but my stepmom, Amy, she knows Lenny really well, so that's how I know him. And our big Lenny story that me and my Ema over there both have is, so one time me, her, and Amy, we all were at Flying Pizza, and I think we'd been actually talking about Lenny and that he likes, kind of just like hole-in-the-wall places and just really loves pizza. And we're talking about him, and then 20 minutes later, in walks Lenny. Just been thinking about him, and here he is, as though we'd like mentally called him. And so, of course, he's friends with all the wait staff, everyone there. So he gets to talking with this one guy that was working and making the pizzas, and so he gets this guy to kind of show off for us. And he's like tossing dough like up and like trying to like catch it behind him and all this fun stuff. It was really cool. And then he dropped the dough, unfortunately. It was still way better than I could do, so I can't complain. But then, so of course, because he's friends with Lenny got him to give my Ema and I the pizza dough. And so then she and I, we started playing frisbee in the restaurant with the pizza dough. We were just throwing it back and forth. So that's my one Lenny story. Thank you.
Okay, we'll bring the microphone. Well, come on, Shane.
Hi guys, my name is Shane Wilsey. I'm related to Helene and Denise and August.
You can move back to that's good. You can just let it go. That's perfect.
Okay. I live 3 doors down this way, and I guess one story about Lenny, well actually, it's also a story of Bill actually too, actually. It was my 21st birthday, and I was old enough to take a beer, and I forget what restaurant we went to, but the funny thing is, so Lenny brought me in, and we sat down at our table, and soon enough, I looked at the window, and this trespasser walked right in front of the restaurant. Well, it turns out it was Bill, actually. So they tricked me, and that was funny, I'll say. But Lenny was a great guy, and I think one time we were celebrating New Year's together as a family, and Lenny came by, and there was a picture of me, Lenny, and my sister August with a piece of bread just hanging out there. Anyway, he wasn't just a normal guy. He was family to all of us. And I'm sorry, Lenny.
Part of what Lenny did, Lenny was my Sam's Club husband. Because I knew Bill would never go to Sam's Club, so I signed Lenny up. And I was his Costco wife. So we had this mutual, so he was able to pick and choose whatever was on sale at either place to pack his car to give away. You know, it truly was family. I'm sure there are other stories. We really want to hear from you. Please. Good.
Hi, I'm Susan. I live at 274, way down at the other end. One time, this was about, I think Emmy was about 8. It was my little friend's daughter, and we went trick-or-treating. And it was, you know, the Westwood Rd trick-or-treat was fun. There's somebody that does hot dogs over here. Maureen does hot dogs. And we were trick-or-treating up the street. On our way back, we hit Lenny's house. And I was with my friend Lacey. It's her daughter. And Emmy goes up to Lenny's house. And we were just standing there talking. And, you know, we weren't really paying attention at the time. And then all of a sudden I realized she's been up on that porch like 20 minutes. And then she comes back down from the porch, and she was about 8, I think, and she goes, "Here's what I got," and it was a quarter. And I said, "Well, what took you so long to get that quarter?" She said, "I had to listen to at least 10 jokes."
Now I'm not a member. I don't live on this. Well, I live on this street now because I live with Fawn and Louise. But a couple of years ago.
Tell who you are.
Oh, I'm Kay McKee. I'm Fawn's grandmother. Okay. Fawn and Louise. And a couple of years ago, Lenny said, "Meet me at the." Where did I go? Oh.
What's it called? Nancy's?
No, it's
Anyway, we went there and got pizza.
Oh, yeah.
He wanted to take me out for pizza. So, just things like that. I'm not even a member of this street, and he was still kind to me. Treated me just like I was one of the buddies, and so.
He liked older women.
Well, he couldn't get much older than me.
Tell them how old you are.
I'm 100. Lenny came by to tell me happy birthday, didn't he? Yes, he did. He came by in his big car, and he came up and he said happy birthday.
That's right.
It was wonderful. And that's all I can think about Lenny, but that was really very important because I just barely knew him, and he made that effort. I'm happy.
Yeah. Thanks, Dean. Yep.
Okay, I'm Sally, and I used to live right over there. Lenny would always, so I worked at the candy store, Colonial Candy, it's on High Street, and I had interactions with him from him driving down the street and stopping to talk to me, but he would come into the candy store every Saturday during the farmer's market, and probably about 2 Saturdays out of the month, he would bring me lunch, And he would sit and talk with me for my whole shift and tell me stories about New York and give me advice on places to eat and ask me all these questions about the candy that we had. But I just remember like thinking I always enjoyed the times when Lenny came in and sat with me. It made my shift go by so much more faster and it was way more enjoyable. And I don't know, it was just like something special to have someone who wanted to spend 3 hours with you on a Saturday afternoon. But yeah, so he was a great guy and he cared a lot about the people around him. And I always felt like so like loved that he would think of me and bring me lunch. And yeah, he definitely like will be missed, but yeah.
One more thing. So, Mandy, who's buying the house next door, she's moving 4 doors down.
Yay!
Yeah. She approached me one afternoon and she said, hey, I don't know who this guy was, but he slowed down and he talked to my kids. and he said, are you allergic to milk products? And my kids said no, and he says, well, then I got pizza for you. And she says, I came out, Mandy, I came out, and she said, no, we don't take pizza. No, we're not having any pizza. And then eventually she figured out that it was Lenny. But one of the things, so we moved to Glenmont, and when we moved, Lenny said, I'm sorry, I'm not seeing you all the time. It makes me sad. What's your address? So I gave him our address. Well, he flipped the numbers around and he talked to one of the neighbors down the street, offering her blueberry muffins. So he was all about food. Anyway, one last story. That was it.
Good.
My name is Amy.
Up to the microphone.
My name's Amy. I lived at 125 many moons ago. And I guess my favorite out of many stories about Lenny was, of course, he would drive his Volvo when he was in his Volvo, and he would drive up the street, and Kevin was, firstborn. Didn't matter how old he was, but as he got older and older and older, he'd always roll down the window. We'd be outside and he'd say, do you like so-and-so? Whatever he had. And I'll just remember it. A lot of times he had cheese for some reason. Does Kevin like cheese? Kevin, do you like cheese? I don't think he likes cheese. It hurts his stomach a little bit. And didn't matter. He'd whip out a piece of Munster cheese, give it to Kevin, and he'd say, Kevin, you like cheese? Kevin would say, I like cheese. He goes, see, he likes cheese. Okay, Lenny had to be right, and that's okay too. But, growing up, all he saw Lenny for many years or times was him driving up the street, roll down the window. I had to convince Kevin eventually that Lenny had legs. Because he was always in his car in the driver's seat. So that's one of my favorite stories of Lenny.
Thank you.
I just have one little story, which
Tell
is
who you are.
I'm Tiffany Grinstead. We live across the street from Lenny. And when it snows sometimes, I don't always see the car at the end of our driveway. And so one day I backed into Lenny's car. And you guys know how much Lenny relied on and loved his car. And what I remember was that he was very gracious about it. And he never brought it up in an untoward way, and we fixed the damage, but given how much he relied on his car, I just thought that was a very sweet thing.
Speaking of cars, I don't know if anybody was living here then, but Lenny used to drive a Volvo. He loved his Volvo. And one day he was at, if I remember the story correctly, he was at Nancy's home cooking, and the feds came by. And they asked who was driving that Volvo. And he said that he was. And they told him that it was a stolen vehicle, which is how he ended up with his Honda. So that's always been kind of a secret little joke because he loved his Volvo. What was the thing that I was gonna? Oh, two other quick things. Whenever we used to travel before COVID, that was our thing, was we didn't buy new cars and we didn't do all these other things. We traveled. And every time we went someplace, Lenny would give us $1. And he would say, it's a Jewish tradition. And he'd say, give it to somebody in need. And so he always had $1 to flip to us. And sometimes he actually took us to the airport. We picked him up at the airport sometimes. And he'd always flip us $1 when we were going someplace. And he'd say, give it to somebody in need. And that was Lenny. And I think one of his most frustrating things of his whole life, was trying to talk to Siri. Siri could not understand him. He would say something into his telephone in Lenny form, and Siri would respond with, I'm sorry, I don't understand you. So he would say it louder. And Siri would say, I'm sorry, I do not understand. And he would say it a third time, and Siri would say, no need to shout. Couldn't get the voice to text. He just couldn't get it. Other stories. There are people who have known Lenny for years. Yay, Megan.
Hi, I'm Megan, and this is Carlo. We're at 40, so we probably hit him as he was, leaving the neighborhood and, on his 10th or 12th stop. But I have a couple of stories. I'm just always so thoughtful, and it was just always nice to have, someone who stopped and was caring and said hello. When I was pregnant with him, he somehow got my husband's phone number, and he was 10 days late, so was it like every other day? He was sending Dave texts, like, has she had the baby? Which was just kind of funny and random, but, and then after he was born, brought us some dinner, which was really nice. A non-food, so he did offer us food a lot too, but a non-food story, he, called me one day and asked me if I needed poop bags for our dog. And so, sure, Lenny, if you have poop bags you want to give us, that's fine. Okay, I'm collecting them for you. Okay, so he drops them off one day, and I didn't respond right away, but he follows up with me and he says, so how are the poop bags working out for you? And I said, well, honestly, Lenny, they're not really working for us. And he goes, well, they were newspaper bags, skinny little newspaper bags, and anyone who has a big dog knows you can't really use skinny little newspaper bags for your big dogs. And he goes, oh, does your dog only poop in those bags that you have to buy? So, just a sweet man, and we'll miss him. Oh, and something that I think we shared some frustration about was that during COVID, not only was he so generously giving people random things out of the back of his seats, he would call from the grocery store and say, what do you need? I'm in the produce aisle. You guys like vegetables, or you like cheese or whatever. And I know we tried to actively stop him from going to the grocery store, probably several stores every day, so that he wouldn't get sick. But, you know, he pulls into the driveway. I'm here. And he opens up his door. What do you need? You want some chicken? You want some broccoli? You guys don't eat broccoli. And, you know, I'm trying to say, you can save some for you. But I guess he actually just had subsequent stops down the road that he had to make. So, you know, I guess I was fortunate to be at the end. But thanks for doing this. Thanks for being here to share stories about him. And thanks so much to the kind and very generous people who gave their hearts to him and just were great models of what being a good neighbor really is all about. So we are very lucky to have such great people on our street. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. That was really beautiful. Now, what we'd like to do is, unless there's anything urgent going on, we'll end it here. That was a really lovely way to end. And if we haven't said it yet, there's food here. Please eat, drink, be merry. We're going to have a fire. We're going to light some candles and light the bonfire in the back. You're welcome to stay. We really so appreciate everybody coming and participating in this. And Lenny, we love you and we're so sorry.
Thank you, Randy. Thank you.
So